For 18 years, Rue Whitcombe had believed her grandfather Alistair Everett Whitcombe had abandoned her. She had been 7 years old the January afternoon her father Elias died at the Whitcombe Watermill on Mill Creek Road, 4 miles east of Cello in Yancey County, North Carolina, crushed beneath a slipped grain wagon he had been unloading in the ice storm. She had been 8 years old the following August when her mother Coraline had remarried a man named Prescott Wren and moved Rue 563 miles east to Wilmington, on the Cape Fear coast, and had told Rue gently, in the kind of voice a mother uses when she is trying to protect a child from a truth she does not yet have the language for, that Grandpa Alistair had chosen not to stay in their lives. Rue had believed her. She had believed her for 18 years. She had believed her through the 11 silent Christmases with no card from the mill on Mill Creek Road, through the 11 silent birthdays with no parcel, through her mother's death from breast cancer when Rue was 19, through the 6 years afterward when Rue had lived alone in a small studio apartment in Wilmington and worked overnight billing at a coastal cardiology practice, and never once picked up the phone to call her grandfather at the mill, because she believed her grandfather had never once wanted her to. When Alistair Whitcombe died in his sleep on the 2nd of April, 2026, in the small back bedroom above the mill house on Mill Creek Road, at the age of 91, Rue was 28 years old. She had not seen him since the January afternoon of her father's funeral 21 years earlier. She drove 563 miles west, from Wilmington to Yancey County, North Carolina, in the front seat of her 1994 Ford Ranger to attend a graveside service for a grandfather she believed had abandoned her. She would learn, 12 days later, that every single word her mother had ever told her about her grandfather Alistair Everett Whitcombe had been wrong. Her older cousin Ellery Whitcombe-Ashcraft, 36, a Charlotte corporate real estate lawyer, walked out of the reading of the will with the Whitcombe Stone farmhouse on Whitcombe Ridge Road, the Vanguard portfolio, and 80 acres of adjacent hardwood land, $2,600,000. Her younger cousin Bramwell Whitcombe-Ashcraft, 34, a Raleigh commercial banking vice president, walked out with the family's Charlotte South End townhouse, the family art collection, and 40 acres of the Whitcombe woodlot, $2,600,000 more. Between the two of them, $5,200,000. Rue walked out with the Whitcombe Watermill on Mill Creek Road, a 128-year-old stone and timber Appalachian overshot water powered gristmill that had been shuttered for the 11 Aprils since Alistair had finally closed the doors after his second stroke in 2015. 12 days later, when she pulled a small brass lever mounted behind the running millstone at the dead center miller's spot of that watermill, a lever no member of the Whitcombe family outside the direct trade bearer line had known existed, the Smithsonian National Museum of American History and the Library of Congress American Folklife Center and the North Carolina Museum of History and the Alice Lloyd College Kentucky Appalachian Heritage Craft Program jointly wired her $6 million before the end of the month, because hidden in a secret room carved into the limestone beneath the mill race of that mill was a 4-generation Yancey County family secret that nobody outside the Whitcombe Watermill on Mill Creek Road had known about for 89 years. And by the time the wire cleared, Rue would understand that her grandfather Alistair had spent every single day of the last 21 years of his life waiting for her to come home. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Rue Whitcombe was 28 years old the cold April morning she buried her grandfather in the small Salo Friends Meeting Cemetery in Yancey County, North Carolina. She stood alone near the back of a small crowd of 40 or so people in her only black dress beneath an old, heavy, dark navy wool overcoat she had bought at the Wilmington Salvation Army in the winter she turned 22. Her long ash-blonde hair with soft caramel undertones was gathered in a low, simple knot at the nape of her neck. Her steady, pale, gray-blue eyes were tired and quiet. She did not cry. In the 6 days since Mr. Alden Merivale, her grandfather's attorney, had called her Wilmington studio apartment on Wednesday afternoon during her post-shift sleep, no tears had come. The grief had settled somewhere deeper than tears could reach. Alistair Everett Whitcombe had been 91 years old when he died in his sleep on the 2nd of April, 2026, in the small back bedroom above the mill house on Mill Creek Road. Rue had not seen him since she was 7 years old. She had convinced herself, over the 18 silent years, that she did not want to. Standing at his graveside in the cold Blue Ridge April rain, she felt the story of his abandonment begin to loosen at the seams. She did not know why. She did not know yet. Rue's father, Elias Alistair Whitcombe, had died at the mill on the 31st of January, 2005, when Rue was 7. Elias had been the 50-year-old third-generation Whitcombe miller. He had been unloading a 40-pound sack of dent corn from the tail of a grain wagon in the middle of a Yancey County ice storm when the wagon had slipped its blocks on the icy mill dock and had rolled forward, and one of the iron-shod rear wheels had caught his coat, and had dragged him under, and had killed him instantly. Rue's mother, Coraline, had been at the Yancey County Regional Medical Center in Burnsville with a 7-year-old daughter who had strep throat when the call came. She had left Rue in the pediatric ward with a nurse. She had driven the 17 miles to the mill in a state of shock. She had never really come back. The following August, Coraline had remarried Prescott Wren, a 38-year-old marine insurance actuary from Wilmington whom she had met in a grief counseling group at the Burnsville Presbyterian Church. 6 weeks after the wedding, Coraline had moved Rue 563 miles east across North Carolina to Prescott's small brick ranch in the Sunset Park neighborhood of Wilmington. She had told Rue, in the gentle protective voice, that Grandpa Alistair had chosen not to be part of their lives. She had said it once. She had never said it again. She had never explained further. When Rue had asked, in the way an 8-year-old asks why Grandpa Alistair did not come to visit, or why they did not go visit him, Coraline had shaken her head very slightly and had not answered, and had changed the subject to the shrimp boats Prescott had promised to take Rue to see. Rue had learned very quickly not to ask. She had not known, she would learn, 12 days after her grandfather's graveside service, sitting alone in Mrs. Coraline Merivale's small yellow kitchen in Cello, North Carolina, that Alistair Whitcombe had written her a birthday card every year for 18 years, and had sent every one of them by U.S. mail to Coraline and Prescott Wren's address at 4218 Sunset Terrace in Wilmington, and that Prescott Wren had intercepted every single one of them at the mailbox before Coraline could see them, and had burned them all in the small brick fire pit at the back of the ranch's fenced yard. 2 days after her grandfather's graveside service, Rue sat in a cracked leather chair at the walnut conference table in the small wood-paneled law office of Mr. Alden Merivale on West Main Street in Burnsville, North Carolina. Mr. Merivale was 78 years old, silver-haired, slow-spoken, with round wire rim reading glasses on a thin black cord around his neck. He had been Alistair Whitcombe's attorney for 41 years. He was also the son of Mrs. Coraline Merivale, the retired Yancey County postmistress, who had watched Alistair walk into the Cello post office every August 15th for 18 consecutive years, Rue's birthday, carrying a fresh cream cotton rag envelope with a Wilmington address on it and no return address on the outside, and slide it through the brass slot, and walk out without speaking. Across the walnut table sat Rue's 2 cousins. Ellery Whitcombe-Ashcraft in a tailored charcoal Brooks Brothers suit over a soft dove-gray broadcloth shirt, his Rolex Datejust catching the pale April light, one polished Cordovan brogue resting casually on the opposite knee. Beside Ellery sat Bramwell Whitcombe-Ashcraft in a soft cream cashmere quarter-zip under a Raleigh commercial banking vice president's dark gray blazer. Ellery was tall, sharp-featured, sandy blonde hair kept short, cool gray-blue eyes. Bramwell was smaller, dark brown-haired, with the easy watchful face of a man accustomed to closing multi-million-dollar loans over lunch. Neither of them had ever met Rue. They were the sons of Alistair Whitcombe's older son, Everett, Rue's late uncle, deceased 2011, and had been raised in Charlotte, and had never been brought up to the mill on Mill Creek Road because their mother Sarah Gwen Ashcraft had considered the mill unnecessarily rural. Mr. Merivale opened a manila folder with hands that moved carefully. "This is the last will and testament of Alistair Everett Whitcombe," he said. "Executed in this office on the 1st of September, 2020. Rue's head came up. September 1st, 2020. She had been 22 then, 3 years out of Cape Fear Community College, working her first overnight billing shift at the Wilmington cardiology practice. She had not thought of her grandfather in 6 months." Mr. Merivale turned a page. "To my eldest grandchild, Ellery Whitcombe-Ashcraft of South End, Charlotte, North Carolina, I leave the Whitcombe Stone farmhouse on Whitcombe Ridge Road, together with all furnishings, 80 acres of associated hardwood land, and the Vanguard investment portfolio at present value, approximately $2,400,000. Ellery inclined his head, satisfied. Mr. Merivale turned another page. "To my second grandchild, Bramwell Whitcombe-Ashcraft of Cameron Village, Raleigh, North Carolina, I leave the Whitcombe Charlotte South End townhouse on East Bland Street, together with all furnishings, the family art collection, at present value, approximately $1,400,000, and 40 acres of the Whitcombe woodlot adjacent to the farmhouse parcel." Bramwell nodded once, pleased. Mr. Merivale turned another page. "To my third grandchild, Rue Alistair Whitcombe of Wilmington, North Carolina," he said, slower now, "I leave the property located at 823 Mill Creek Road, 4 miles east of Cello, Yancey County, North Carolina, the Whitcombe Watermill, 1 1/10 of an acre, together with the stone and timber mill building, the mill race, the mill pond, and everything that is within." There was a long silence. Ellery broke it. He laughed once, short. "The mill. The mill, Mr. Merivale said. Grandfather left her the old watermill." "He did." Bramwell added, more kindly than Ellery, "I do not know if you know, Miss Whitcombe, but that mill has not run in 11 years. The overshot wheel has probably rotted out. The dam has certainly silted up. I would estimate you are looking at $90,000 of demolition, and probably twice that to clear the mill race so the county does not fine you for the standing water. If it would help, Ellery and I could look into getting you a favorable estimate from a demolition contractor over in Marion." Rue said nothing. Ellery said, "Grandfather always was a sentimental man about the mill. He kept it standing because he could not bring himself to see it torn down. But it is time now." Ellery and Bramwell stood up together. Ellery was already reaching for his phone. Bramwell was already reaching for a leather portfolio bag. Neither of them said goodbye to Rue. The office door closed behind them. The silence returned. Mr. Merivale took off his reading glasses. He folded the glasses with slow care and set them atop the manila folder. He looked at Rue across the walnut table. "Your grandfather told me you would not cry," he said gently. "I am not crying," Rue said. He nodded slowly. He rose with slow care, walked down the office hallway, and was absent for nearly a full minute. When he came back, he was carrying a single small hand-painted wooden sign, 10 inches by 16 inches, the painted lettering Whitcombe Watermill EST, 1898 in deep walnut on a pale cream ground, with a small painted image of an overshot mill wheel in the lower corner, weathered, hung on the paneled wall behind his desk for so many years that the brass picture wire on the back had darkened into the cream paint. "Your great-great-grandfather Absalom Whitcombe painted that sign in the spring of 1898, Mr. Merivale said. My father purchased it at the Whitcombe 1953 estate sale for $2. He was 15 years old at the time. He kept it on the wall of his own law office on West Main, here in Burnsville, for 44 years. When he retired in 1997, he handed it to me. Your grandfather Alistair never asked for it back. He only wanted to know it was safe. I have been keeping it safe for you. Rue picked up the wooden sign. She traced the softly worn cream lettering slowly with the tip of her thumb. She did not cry. She placed the sign back on the walnut table. Mr. Maravelli slid a heavy old iron key on a tarnished brass ring across the walnut. That fits the padlock on the front door of the mill, he said. Your grandfather gave it to me the day after he came home from Mission Hospital in Asheville last November. He told me that when you came for it, and he did say when, Miss Whitcombe, he never said if, I should put it in your hand and not in anyone else's. He also slid a single folded sheet of cream cotton rag paper, sealed at the fold with deep red wax. The wax seal had Alistair Whitcombe's hand-cut wheel and stone monogram pressed into it. Rue's name was written across the front of the folded letter in Alistair's slow, careful Blue Ridge hand. He wrote that letter on the 18th of November, 2025, Mr. Maravel said. 4.5 months before he died. He asked me to give it to you the day you read the will. He also slid one more envelope across the walnut, a plain business-sized envelope. My mother Coraline asked me to give this to you also. She said you would want to see it. Please do not open it until you are alone at the mill. She was very specific about that. Rue picked up all 3 items carefully, the letter with the red wax seal, the plain envelope from Mrs. Maravel, and the wooden sign under her left arm, and closed her right hand around the iron key. She tucked the letter and the plain envelope both into the inside pocket of her heavy dark navy wool overcoat against her chest. She would open them that night, alone at the mill. She would not open them here. She thanked Mr. Maravel. She walked out of the law office and down the wooden front steps to the curb where her Ford Ranger was parked. A 1994 Ford Ranger in faded charcoal. The truck she had bought at a Wilmington auction house in 2020 for $1,900 with every dollar she had saved from her first year at the coastal cardiology practice. She set the wooden sign flat on the bench seat next to her. She slipped the iron key on its brass ring into the breast pocket of her overcoat. She started the engine. She drove west out of Burnsville on Route 19 east, then north on Route 80 toward Silo, through the winding forested Blue Ridge mountain hollows of Yancey County, past the frost-tipped April meadows of the South Toe River, past the tall stands of white oak and eastern hemlock the way her mother had never once driven her, because Coraline had cut all of Yancey County from her life the August after Elias died. When the paved road gave way to gravel 2 miles east of Silo on Mill Creek Road, Rue slowed the Ranger and rolled down the window. The air smelled of April Creek water and Blue Ridge wood smoke. Cool and quick and old. A mile up the gravel of Mill Creek Road, where the road bent south around a stand of blooming white dogwoods and the long line of a hand laid Yancey County stone wall along the north bank of Mill Creek, she saw it for the first time since she was 7 years old. It was a 128-year-old stone and timber Appalachian gristmill on the south bank of Mill Creek. 2 stories. The lower half was hand-laid Yancey County fieldstone 2 feet thick at the base. The upper half was weathered silver-gray heart pine clapboards. Hand-hewn white oak timber framing visible at the corners. A steep cedar shake roof. A small, covered stone porch. A short stone chimney rising from the back. A tall paned north-facing miller's window along the visible side wall. A hand-forged iron hasp on the worn cedar plank front door, and a heavy iron padlock through the hasp. And on the east side of the mill, still catching the slow, strong April flow of Mill Creek, a hand-hewn white oak overshot water wheel 18 feet across. Its curved wooden buckets weathered silver by 128 North Carolina winters, still turning slowly under the weight of the mill race, still catching the sunlight as it turned. Alistair had never let the wheel stop turning. He had kept the mill race clear of debris every March for 11 years, even after his hands could no longer grind. The mill was shuttered. The wheel was alive. The Whitcombe Watermill did not look abandoned at all. Rue pulled the Ranger off Mill Creek Road onto the narrow dirt track that ran up to the front of the mill. She killed the engine. The pale gold late-morning April light of the Blue Ridge Mountains caught the silver-gray heartpine clapboards and the wet fieldstone and the slow-turning silver wheel and held them all in cool spring gold. She sat in the cab for a long moment. She stepped down out of the truck. She walked up the worn dirt track. She fit the heavy iron key into the heavy iron padlock. The padlock turned. The padlock fell open in her hand. She lifted the hasp off the staple. She pushed open the worn cedar plank front door. The smell of the mill was the smell of stone-ground cornmeal and buckwheat and heartpine and slow river water and the ghost of her father's tobacco pipe. It was the smell of a place she had spent every Saturday of her early childhood in until she was 7, and had never entered once again after her father died. The pale gold April light from the tall, paned north-facing miller's window lay across the wide plank chestnut milling room floor in a single long band of morning light. Alistair Whitcombe's milling tools were still on their pegs along the north wall. His hand-forged mill picks in 3 sizes for dressing the millstones. His long-handled grain scoops. His copper grain moisture tester. His hand-carved oak spile mallets. His well-worn leather-binding book of grain calibrations passed down from his father Owen. At the center of the milling room, on a raised platform of hand-hewn white oak beams, the 2 round Yancey County granite millstones, the runner stone above and the bedstone below, sat quietly. They had not turned in 11 Aprils. The wooden bevel gears that connected them to the overshot wheel outside stood silent and disengaged. Rue unlaced her brown leather work boots on the worn cedar threshold and pulled them off. She pulled off her wool socks. She walked barefoot into the milling room in cuffed dark denim jeans and her heavy oatmeal cream cable knit wool cardigan and her heavy dark navy wool overcoat unbuttoned. Her ash blonde low knot quiet at the nape of her neck. The wide plank chestnut floor was polished gold by 128 years of standing miller's boots. The chestnut floor greeted her bare soles in bands of warm and cool as she walked. She felt the slight shallow groove worn into the chestnut at the dead center miller's spot, the spot where a miller stands to feed the grain hopper, before she saw it. At that spot the chestnut lay nearly a full quarter-inch below the surrounding boards. She knelt at the dead center miller's spot. She looked for the iron ring set into the floorboards, the same iron ring she had seen in her mind's eye during the drive up Mill Creek Road, remembered from every story she had read about the Whitcombe Watermill, the ring she was certain would be there, that would lift a floorboard, that would reveal a tin box. That was the way this always went. There was no iron ring. She sat back on her heels. She looked at the chestnut floor. There was no iron ring anywhere in the wide plank chestnut around the dead center miller's spot. She rose slowly. She looked at the 2 granite millstones on their raised oak platform. She walked around them slowly. She ran her fingers along the joinery of the wooden bevel gears where they met the millstone axle. Nothing. She looked at the north wall of the milling room where Alistair's tools hung. Nothing. She stood in the middle of the milling room for a long moment. And then she remembered. With a kind of small, quiet certainty she could not have named until that moment, a single sentence her grandfather had said to her on the last Saturday she had ever spent at the mill with him. She had been 7 years old. She had asked him where the miller kept his money. Alistair had smiled and had said, in his slow, careful Blue Ridge cadence, behind the running stone, "My Rue." Always behind the running stone. She had not thought of that sentence in 21 years. She walked behind the raised oak platform of the 2 millstones. She knelt behind the runner stone. She ran her fingers along the underside of the oak beam that supported it. Her fingertips brushed something small and cold and metal, set flush into the underside of the beam. It was a small brass lever, about the size of her thumb, mounted upside down beneath the beam so that no one standing at the miller's spot could see it. She wrapped her fingers around the small brass lever. She pulled it downward. 2 things happened at once. From outside the mill, she heard the soft, slow creak of a hand-forged iron sluice gate opening in the mill race, a gate she had not known existed, diverting the flow of Mill Creek water away from the main mill race and into a smaller side channel, and on the wide plank chestnut floor beneath her feet. A section of the chestnut roughly 4 feet by 6 sat flush with the floor. At the spot she had been about to step across on her way back to the front door, gave a small hollow sigh and rose smoothly upward on hand-forged iron counterweights. A hidden trap-door counterweighted to open when the sluice gate was opened. A short, narrow chestnut stair descended into a low-ceilinged cellar carved directly into the Yancey County limestone beneath the mill race itself. Rue went down the chestnut steps in her bare feet. The cellar floor was laid in worn Yancey County limestone. The walls were hand-carved from the natural limestone bedrock, water-shaped over 10,000 years by the same Mill Creek water that had once flowed through this cavern and had, at some point in Alistair Whitcombe's 1898 excavation, been redirected around it. The cellar was 14 feet by 20. The ceiling was hand-hewn heart pine timbers set directly into the limestone above. The cellar smelled of dry limestone and grain dust and cured hickory and the faint honey-sweet tang of aged buckwheat mother culture. A single brass kerosene lantern hung from a heart pine beam at the center of the cellar above a long heart pine work table. Alistair had left the lantern hanging there. She took a long wooden match from the brass cup at the lantern's foot, dragged it swiftly along the lantern base, and set the wick alight. The warm amber gold of the kerosene lamplight caught the cellar and held it. Along all 4 walls of the cellar, on heart pine shelves built into the limestone, 380 small stoneware crocks of Whitcombe heritage grain mother cultures rested horizontally on the upper and middle shelves. Each crock was labeled in Alistair's slow, careful Blue Ridge hand. Whitcombe buckwheat master culture, descended from Alistair Whitcombe, October 1898. Whitcombe Cherokee white flint corn, descended from Owen Whitcombe, September 1942. Whitcombe turkey red wheat, descended from Elias Whitcombe, June 1985. Living cultures of 89 years of Yancey County heritage grain seed, waiting. On the lower shelves, lined up in a single continuous row, were 47 leather-bound original Whitcombe Watermill annual ledgers, 1898 through 2015, gold embossed in Blue Ridge School spine work. Row upon row of ledgers stretched down the wall, turned the corner, and continued along the next. At the center of the heart pine work table beneath the kerosene lantern was a single-hand illustrated miller's manual. The cover was stamped the methodology of heritage Appalachian water-powered grist milling. A. Whitcombe, 1898. The manual was 78 pages. Every page was hand-illustrated. Every measurement was Absalom's hand. Beside the manual were 12 large sheets of cotton drafting paper, folded once and tied with a deep red ribbon. She untied the ribbon and unfolded the first sheet. It was a hand-drawn map of Yancey County in Alistair Whitcombe's 1898 hand, with 187 small black ink dots and the name of a family beside each dot. Beside the 12 sheets, at the head of the table, was a single folded sheet of cream cotton rag paper, dated April the 17th, 1933, in Owen Whitcombe's careful, slow Blue Ridge hand. I, Owen Alistair Whitcombe, master miller of the Whitcombe Watermill on Mill Creek Road in Yancey County, North Carolina, on this, the 17th day of April 1933. Freely promise the 47 Yancey County mountain families whose corn and wheat and buckwheat I have this winter ground without payment that I will continue to grind their weekly grain into meal and flour at no charge for as long as my hands can still dress a millstone and my mill race can still turn a wheel, so long as the Whitcombe Watermill stands on Mill Creek Road. No Yancey County family shall lack the meal and flour for their table for want of the cost of the grinding. So help me Almighty God. The single sheet was signed at the bottom Owen Alistair Whitcombe, 17 April 1933. Below Owen's signature, in 3 more slow, careful hands, were 3 more undertaking notations. I, Alistair Everett Whitcombe, on the 17th day of April 1948. At the age of 13, under the hand of my father Owen, undertake the same promise upon the death of my father. I, Elias Alistair Whitcombe, on the 17th day of April 1982, at the age of 27, under the hand of my father Alistair, undertake the same promise upon the death of my father. Below Elias's line, in a fourth careful hand, a hand that Rue recognized because she had spent 18 years believing it never wanted to write to her again, was the fourth undertaking. I, Alistair Everett Whitcombe, on the 2nd of February 2005, at the age of 70, under my own hand alone, take back up the promise upon the death of my son Elias, until such time as my granddaughter Rue may return to this cellar to sign in his stead. Alistair had re-signed the promise in his own hand alone the day after her father's funeral. He had held the promise open for 21 years, waiting for her to come home. She sat at the heart pine work table in the warm gold of the kerosene lamplight for a long time. Outside the mill, the pale April afternoon turned into the deep, cool Blue Ridge Mountain evening. The kerosene lamp burned steady. 4 generations of Whitcombe millers had signed the promise. Owen in 1933, Alistair in 1948, Elias in 1982. Alistair again in 2005, 89 years across those signatures. The promise had been kept through 89 winters, and her grandfather Alistair, who had every right to close the mill the day his son died, had held it open for 2 more decades waiting for his granddaughter to come home. That night, in a small guest bedroom at the Merivale Bed and Breakfast in Cello that Mr. Merivale had arranged for her, the Merivale, she now understood, of Mrs. Coraline Merivale, the retired postmistress, and her son Alden the attorney, Rue sat at a small pine writing desk and slid the folded letter Mr. Merivale had given her onto the worn olive-green desk blotter. She worked the deep red wax loose with the nail of her thumb. The wax cracked clean. She unfolded the letter. My Rue, I am not a man of words. I regret that I was not able to be a man of more words for you. Your grandmother Alethea was the word keeper of this family, and when we lost her the autumn you turned 3, I think most of the words went with her. I am writing this on the 18th of November, 2025, 4.5 months before the doctor at Mission Hospital in Asheville is going to tell me what I already know. My father Owen chose me as the keeper of the trade in 1948, when I was 13 years old, in the same limestone room where I hope you have found this letter. He passed the trade in due course to your father Elias in 1982. And then, on the 31st of January, 2005, my son Elias was crushed by his own grain wagon on the mill dock in an ice storm. He was 50. I was 70. And I sat alone in this same limestone room for 3 days after his funeral, and on the 3rd afternoon I re-signed his promise in my own hand alone, because someone had to, and because I could not bear to let the promise lapse while there was still a chance my 7-year-old granddaughter Rue would one day come home to sign it in her father's stead. I want you to know, my Rue, that I wrote you a birthday card every August 15th for 18 years. I have kept a paper carbon of every single one of them in the top drawer of the pine writing desk in this cellar. I wrote and mailed the last one on August 15th of 2024, when you turned 26. Your grandmother Alethea's handwriting is more graceful than mine, but I did my best. I do not know what your mother told you about me after Elias died. I did not know then, and I do not know now. I only know that I never received any acknowledgement of the cards from Wilmington, and that after a few years I understood that whatever the cards were reaching, they were not reaching you. I did not press. Your mother had lost her husband. She was doing what she believed she needed to do to protect her daughter. I could not fault her for that. I only wished I could have found a way through. I did what I could through other means. In 2014, when you turned 16 and were beginning to think about community college, I contacted a scholarship trust I had set up in 1973 at Cape Fear Community College, the Elias Whitcombe Memorial Scholarship for a first-year student pursuing accounting or medical office administration, and I asked the trust to name you specifically. You applied on your own the winter of 2016. You did not know the trust was mine. It has been mine since 1973. I chose to name it for your father Elias in 2005, the year after his death. It funded every dollar of your community college tuition from 2017 to 2019. I am leaving your cousins Ellery and Bramwell the farmhouse and the townhouse and the portfolio and the art. Their father Everett was my older son. They are entitled to his share. I have no complaint with them. But this mill, my Rue, your cousins cannot sell. This mill your cousins cannot divide. This mill is yours. Come home when you can, my girl. The wheel is still turning. Your grandfather. Alistair Everett Whitcombe, November 18th, 2025. Rue laid the letter flat on the worn olive-green desk blotter. She did not cry. She had not cried at the graveside service. She had not cried in the law office. She had not cried in the hidden limestone cellar. No tears came at the small pine writing desk. She had been standing beside the raised oak platform of the 2 granite millstones, listening for the sound of a sluice gate she had not known existed, when the not-crying place had set itself in her. She would carry that place for the rest of her life. She opened Mrs. Coraline Maravilli's plain business envelope next. Inside were 18 U.S. Postal Service return-to-sender receipts, folded neatly in half. Each receipt was stamped return to sender. Refused, 4218 Sunset Terrace, Wilmington, North Carolina. Each receipt was signed on the back in a hand Rue did not recognize, but that she understood immediately. Prescott Wren. Beneath the 18 receipts, in a small hand-written note in Mrs. Merivale's careful spinsterly hand, was a single sentence. I kept these because your grandfather asked me to. He never told your mother. He said Coraline was carrying enough already. Coraline Merivale. Rue laid the receipts flat on the worn olive-green desk blotter beside the letter. She did not cry. She walked to the bed and breakfast's small back porch. The April night above Salo was cool and clear. The stars above the South River Valley were sharp. She stood on the back porch in her grandmother Alethea's old wool shawl that Mrs. Merivale had also left for her, and she said, into the cool dark Blue Ridge mountain air, "Thank you, Grandpa. I will grind again." She drove up Mill Creek Road the next morning at first light. She swept the fresh dogwood petals off the mill porch. She lit the wood stove. She set the coffee pot atop the iron range and let it brew. She wrapped a soft cotton cloth around 2 fingers, dipped it in the beeswax polish bowl on the heartpine shelf, and set to work polishing the worn heartpine tool bench in long, slow strokes. The deep golden chestnut grain of 128 years of miller's tool motions emerged from the cotton cloth like a face surfacing under water. She worked the bench for 3 hours. That afternoon she carried her grandfather's old cherry wood drafting board down to the mill in the bed of the Ranger. She rested the drafting board on the heartpine table at the back of the milling room. She composed a letter by hand on cream cotton rag paper in her own slow, careful Blue Ridge script. She wrote the letter to Dr. Verity Ashworth Beauregard, Senior Curator of Heritage American Water-Powered Grist Milling at the Smithsonian National Museum of American History, Washington, D.C. She wrote no return name anywhere on the envelope. She put down only Whitcombe Watermill, Mill Creek Road, Salo, Yancey County, North Carolina. She drove down into Salo and slid the letter through the brass slot of the Salo post office, the same brass slot her grandfather had slid 18 birthday cards through over 18 consecutive Augusts. 12 days later, on a warm, bright Blue Ridge Mountain morning of late April, a climate-controlled archive van from Washington pulled up the dirt track and stopped in front of the Whitcombe Watermill. 3 more vehicles followed. Just behind the first van came a second, bearing the Library of Congress American Folklife Center seal on its side, a sedan from the North Carolina Museum of History in Raleigh. a truck from the Alice Lloyd College Kentucky Appalachian Heritage Craft Program. Dr. Verity Ashworth Beauregard from the Smithsonian stepped out of the first van, 68 years old, silver hair pulled back in a low knot. She had spent her professional life looking for a Yancey County, North Carolina Blue Ridge overshot watermill she had read about in a single line of a 1933 Yancey County Journal article when she was a graduate student 39 years earlier. Dr. Aldous Farrow from the Library of Congress American Folklife Center, a soft-spoken Caucasian man of 64 in a heavy dark charcoal wool overcoat, had never expected to stand on the chestnut floor of Absalom Whitcombe's watermill on Mill Creek Road. Dr. Perpetua Rothstein from the North Carolina Museum of History, a stately black woman of 70 in a long forest green wool cape, had once served on a Cape Fear Community College accreditation committee that had reviewed Rue's own file in 2017 without knowing that the applicant was the granddaughter of the man whose Watermill Preservation Trust had endowed the very Elias Whitcombe Memorial Scholarship. She had also reviewed. Dr. Emery Havman from the Alice Lloyd College Kentucky Appalachian Heritage Craft Program was 63 and the great-grandson of a Yancey County subsistence farmer who had brought his family's whole autumn corn crop to the Whitcombe Watermill in the winter of 1933 and had been given his weekly meal for the next 4 years at no charge. He was the founding director of the Alice Lloyd Heritage Appalachian Gristmilling Program, founded 23 years earlier on the strength of a small anonymous 1973 founding gift. Rue met them at the mill door in her heavy oatmeal cream cable knit wool cardigan and a heavy canvas miller's apron tied at her waist. She showed them the milling room. She showed them the 2 round Yancey County granite millstones on their raised oak platform. She showed them Alistair Whitcombe's milling tools on the north wall. She showed them the small brass lever behind the runner stone. She pulled the lever. She let them hear the sluice gate open outside. She led them through the raised hidden trap door and down the chestnut stair into the limestone room carved beneath the mill race. She placed the kerosene lantern squarely on the middle of the heartpine work table. She watched their faces when they saw the 380 stoneware crocks of living Whitcombe grain mother cultures. She watched their faces when they took in the 47 leather-bound annual ledgers along the lower shelves. She watched their faces when they read Absalom's methodology. She watched each of the 4 in turn read the 89-year-old promise through with slow attention, including the 4th signature, Alistair's in his own hand alone, dated the 2nd of February 2005. Dr. Rothstein from the North Carolina Museum of History sat down on the chestnut stool at the heartpine table when she read that 4th signature. Dr. Farrow from the Library of Congress had to walk back up the chestnut stair and stand in the milling room for 15 minutes. Dr. Havman from Alice Lloyd put his face in his hands. That afternoon, at the heartpine work table in the cellar, in the warm gold of the kerosene lamplight, the 4 institutions made their joint offer. The Smithsonian would acquire the 1898 Methodology Manual and the 12 sheets of the Yancey County Family's Register. The Library of Congress American Folklife Center would acquire the 47 original Whitcombe Watermill annual ledgers. The North Carolina Museum of History would acquire, in trust for perpetual living preservation, the 380 living Whitcombe grain mother cultures, to be maintained and refreshed weekly in a purpose-built temperature-controlled heritage seed vault in Raleigh in perpetuity, with the exception of seed samples returned to Rue at the mill for continued planting on the Whitcombe land. The Alice Lloyd College Kentucky Appalachian Heritage Craft Program would receive the 89-year-old promise on perpetual loan, on the condition that the program would underwrite the Whitcombe Watermill's ongoing operation and the continuation of the promise. The joint offer came to $6 million. Rue accepted the offer. The 4 curators carried the accessioned items out of the cellar in archival foam boxes at sundown, and the wire cleared at the Yancey County Farmers Bank on the morning of the 14th of May. That afternoon, the 14th of May, Rue sat in the office of Mrs. Everly Broughton at the Yancey County Farmers Bank in Burnsville. Mrs. Broughton had been the branch manager for 27 years. She showed Rue a printed wire receipt. $6 million. Mrs. Broughton folded the receipt and slid it across the desk. Then she spoke the words she had been holding on to for 27 years. "One last thing your grandfather asked me to pass along when this day came." Mrs. Broughton opened a small Yancey County Farmers Bank leather-bound ledger of her own and turned it around for Rue to read. The ledger was a record of 47 separate small deposits, one per winter, beginning on the 15th of February 1973 and ending on the 15th of February 2015, into a single savings account in the name of the Yancey County Heritage Appalachian Gristmilling Preservation Trust. Each deposit was the cash proceeds of a single sale of a single gold coin through an Asheville numismatic intermediary. Each deposit was between $550 and $840. The trust had transferred the cumulative total every year to the Alice Lloyd College Kentucky Appalachian Heritage Craft Program. The trust had funded 47 full Alice Lloyd College scholarships in heritage Appalachian gristmilling and grain preservation. Each scholarship was named for a Yancey County family. Each Yancey County family was one of the original 47 of 1933. 47 Alice Lloyd College scholars across 42 years had been quietly paid for by one gold coin from a limestone room beneath a Yancey County mill race, sold every February by Rue's grandfather, Alistair Whitcombe, until 2015, when his hands became too shaky to make the drive down to Asheville. Rue laid her hand flat on the ledger. She did not cry. In the year that followed the wire, Rue reopened the Whitcombe Watermill on Mill Creek Road. She ground and delivered weekly meal and flour to the descendants of the 47 Yancey County families who came, by word of mouth alone, up the dirt track to the mill door with sacks of their own corn and wheat and buckwheat. She did not charge any of them for the grinding. She ground the grain the way Absalom had ground it in 1933 from the 1898 methodology manual, using the same overshot wheel her great-great-grandfather had first hung on the mill race in 1898. She brought 4 Alice Lloyd College Kentucky Appalachian Heritage Craft scholars to apprentice at the mill one Saturday a month. She inscribed the 5th signature into the 1898 methodology manual, undertaking the same promise upon the death of her grandfather on the 17th of April, 2026. The Library of Congress American Folklife Center entered a perpetual partnership with the Whitcombe Watermill for 47 Heritage Appalachian gristmilling workshops per year, at $2,200 per workshop across a 10-year contract. She bought back 40 acres of the Whitcombe woodlot her younger cousin Bramwell had begun to list for sale in June. She did not tell Bramwell. She bought the acreage through Mr. Merivale at the closing. She put the entire 40 acres into a perpetual conservation easement with the Blue Ridge Land Trust. Her cousins did not call her after the wire. Ellery did not come to the mill. Bramwell did not come. Neither of them ever found out about the promise. The promise had never been recorded anywhere outside the walls of that limestone room. That summer, Rue began to expect Mrs. Coraline Merivale on Saturday afternoons. Mrs. Merivale was 76 years old. She had been the Salo postmistress from 1975 until 2010. She had watched Alistair Whitcombe slide a fresh cream cotton envelope through the brass slot on 18 consecutive August 15ths without ever telling anyone in Yancey County what she was seeing. She drove a dark burgundy 1974 Jeep Cherokee she had bought new in 1974. She brought her homemade dandelion jelly and a small paper sack of buckwheat pancakes she had made that morning at her farmhouse in Cello. She sat on the front porch of the mill in the late afternoon Blue Ridge Mountain summer light, and she and Rue ate buckwheat pancakes and dandelion jelly and drank coffee from the iron range pot. And Mrs. Merivale told her stories about her grandfather Alistair that her own father had not lived long enough to tell her. Rue did not pay Mrs. Merivale for her Saturday visits. Mrs. Merivale did not expect to be paid. She said only, when Rue asked her once at the end of an autumn afternoon what she could ever do for her. "Just bring me coffee, Rue. Just bring me coffee." There is a thing about the trade our grandfathers teach us to keep. It is not a thing of the will. It is not a thing of the attorney's cracked leather chair or of the manila folder neatly aligned on his walnut. It is not a thing of the older cousin in his tailored charcoal Brooks Brothers suit or the younger cousin in his commercial banking blazer. The trade is the hand that learned, the hand that teaches, and the hand that comes after. And the trade is also, sometimes, the hand that reaches through 18 years of silence and returned envelopes and refused mail to keep a promise open until a granddaughter can come home to sign it. The trade is itself the trade. We do not always know what is ground in the limestone room beneath the mill race of an old Blue Ridge Mountain grist mill on Mill Creek Road. We do not always know what is behind the running stone. We do not always know what our grandfathers tell us on the last Saturday of our childhood that we will not remember for 21 years. What her cousins did not get does not have a price on it. What they did not get was the hand that learned at the raised oak platform of 2 round Yancey County granite millstones in a 128-year-old overshot watermill on Mill Creek Road. What they did not get was the small brass lever behind the runner stone that opened a sluice gate they did not know existed and lifted a counterweighted trapdoor they did not know was there. What they did not get was the deep red wax seal of the crossed mill pick and grain scoop on the inside edge of an 1898 promise. What they did not get was the promise that was made in the worst Blue Ridge Mountain winter of 1933 to 47 Yancey County families who could not otherwise afford to have their winter corn ground into meal. What they did not get was the 89-year-old hand that had been carrying that promise across 4 generations. What they did not get was 18 birthday cards mailed to a Wilmington address for 18 consecutive August 15ths. What they did not get was the only thing that mattered. He had been teaching us, our grandfather had been teaching us, all along. He had been teaching us at the running stone. He had been teaching us at the heart pine work table in the limestone room beneath the mill race. He had been teaching us in the slow, careful Blue Ridge script of the 1898 methodology manual. He had been teaching us in the deep red wax seal of the crossed mill pick and grain scoop. He had been teaching us in 18 unopened birthday cards burned in a small brick fire pit 563 miles east. He had been teaching us in a small brass lever mounted upside down beneath a heart pine beam that no one standing at the miller's spot could see. We had not always seen the teaching underway, but the teaching had continued forward all the same. The teaching was the trade. The teaching is the trade. The teaching will be the trade for as long as our hands can still dress a millstone and our mill race can still turn a wheel. And in the end, that is the only inheritance worth anything at all. Not the Whitcombe stone farmhouse on Whitcombe Ridge Road, not the Charlotte South End townhouse, not the Vanguard portfolio, not the family art collection. The hand that learned. The hand that teaches. The hand that comes after. Rue Alistair Whitcombe, 28 years old, the youngest, the hand that came after, sat on the worn cedar bench on the front porch of the Whitcombe Watermill on Mill Creek Road in the last hour of daylight in mid-October. She wore her heavy oatmeal cream cable knit wool cardigan. Her grandmother Alethea's wool shawl was draped over her shoulders. A tin cup of coffee sat warm between her cupped hands. The small hand-carved wooden wheel and stone stamp from her grandfather Alistair's miller's apron was in the breast pocket of her woolwork shirt against her chest. The salt gold light of the late October Blue Ridge Mountain afternoon lay across the rolling Yancey County hollows beyond the road. The white oaks and eastern hemlocks up the long curve of the mill dirt track had turned the deep russet of mid-October. The overshot wheel on the east side of the mill turned slowly and steadily under the running weight of Mill Creek. Behind her, through the tall paned north-facing miller's window, warm amber kerosene lamplight caught the raised oak platform of the 2 granite millstones inside. The smell of stone-ground cornmeal and buckwheat and October wood smoke and dandelion jelly was in the cool October air. Far in the distance, up the long curve of Mill Creek Road, a single dark burgundy 1974 Jeep Cherokee came slowly up the dirt track. Mrs. Maravelle was coming for her Saturday coffee and buckwheat pancakes. Rue Whitcombe had inherited a river, and in the end, that river proved far more valuable than $5,200,000. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell us in the comments, has anyone in your family ever quietly carried a kindness like that, one nobody else knew about? We would love to read your stories. It helps us keep making them. See you on the next quiet road.